Tension between China and the Philippines reaching a boiling point in the disputed South China Sea.
Have you ever heard of the term gray zone in geopolitics? What is it? The term gray zone is used to describe acts of aggression by a state that are harmful to another state but typically remain below the threshold commonly recognized as acts of war. The concept has been around for a long time. To quote Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. The one country best known for employing gray zone tactics is China. These tactics have included ramming, shadowing, blocking, encircling, firing water cannons, and using military-grade lasers against civilian ships and military vessels. China also relies on its formidable Coast Guard and fishing militia to occupy disputed areas, establishing a permanent presence that the targeted country cannot easily dislodge. The country is also planning to implement a new policy that would authorize the Chinese Coast Guard to detain foreigners crossing into waters claimed by China. China's primary goals in using this strategy are to assert sovereignty over the disputed South China Sea, control strategic maritime and airspace, and gradually establish its influence in the region. The Philippines remains the most affected littoral state due to China's overtures in the South China Sea. Follow along as Out There International takes you inside the Philippines' strategy to counter China's gray zone threat. The South China Sea remains one of the world's most hotly disputed waters that could descend into a larger conflict that puts the United States and China on a collision course. China continues to act belligerently in the South China Sea despite warnings and condemnations from the international community. This may explain why the Philippines has recently embarked on an extensive defense modernization program and is actively building alliances and relationships with like-minded states. Under Rodrigo Duterte, the Philippines preferred to quietly handle many of China's provocations, sometimes waiting weeks or months to release information on any incidents in the South China Sea. But Ferdinand Marcos has been less eager to appease China and has adopted an assertive stance on the Philippines' sovereignty in the South China Sea. One of the foremost strategies adopted by the Philippines to tackle China's gray zone threat has been to be vocal and expressive about the issue on the diplomatic and media front. The idea is that Beijing will no longer be able to deny its actions as it has done in the past, and perhaps be shamed into adhering to international law. Since the beginning of this year, the Philippines Coast Guard has taken extra efforts to document and publicize assertive Chinese behavior. When China Coast Guard ship aimed a military-grade laser at a Philippine patrol boat this February, the Coast Guard protested and released a video of the incident. Armed with that footage and the law, President Marcos summoned China's ambassador to Manila over the incident. The US and other states rebuked China for the incident. The Philippine Coast Guard's role as a mouthpiece against Chinese aggression allows like-minded states to express condemnation and reproach, which puts Beijing in the spotlight, the Philippine Coast Guard Commodore, J. Tariella, says. Chinese actions in the shadows are now checked, which also force them to come out in the open or to publicly lie. In today's world, wars are not won solely through kinetic strength. It is the narrative of the conflict that truly matters. The party that successfully wins public opinion and minds can cast the opposing side in a negative light. The Philippines recognizes that a conflict over the South China Sea is unlikely to be fought on the battlefield. Instead, it will likely unfold through information warfare. In 2016, an international arbitration tribunal found that 2nd Thomas Shoal, a low-tide elevation, falls squarely within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. It ruled that the Philippines has the exclusive rights to economic and natural resources in the area under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. The tribunal invalidated China's claims of sovereignty and economic rights over the area. Since the landmark 2016 arbitration victory, the Philippines have been using lawfare strategy at its best. Combining lawfare with information warfare will make it more lethal for the long term. To address the China threat in the South China Sea, the Philippines is building security-based alliances with like-minded states as part of its strategic approach. Earlier this month, the Philippines conducted their largest ever annual military drills, which included defending an island chain and launching an anti-ship cruise missile to sink a vessel. Since taking office in 2022, President Marcos has increased the number of military bases the U.S. can temporarily use from 5 to 9 under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Recently, Australia, Japan, the Philippines, and the United States conducted joint exercises within Manila's exclusive economic zone for the first time. These states are now collectively referred to as the New Quad, or Squad. Japan and the Philippines are under negotiations for a reciprocal troop access agreement that should materialize by July. The Philippines and Australia have upgraded cooperation in maritime security and elevated their partnership to strategic following Marcos's visit to Canberra in February. The Philippines also received some arms assistance from India, such as a recent delivery of much-needed BrahMos anti-ship cruise missiles. While the Philippines is actively collaborating with other states to counter China, its strategies have yet to effectively deter Beijing's encroachments in the South China Sea. One possible option can be that it revises its security agreement with the United States. Currently, the treaty says that an armed attack on the Philippines would mandate military intervention by the U.S. The revised treaty could expand to include the Chinese gray zone tactics as a prerequisite for the U.S. military involvement. Another potential revision could be broadening the assets covered by the treaty to include the civilian ships that regularly resupply Philippine troops stationed on the Sierra Madre. This could make China think twice about violating a revised defense treaty, fearing the possibility of armed conflict with the U.S. The Philippines can also deter China's gray zone tactics by removing the Sierra Madre and replacing it with a joint military base with the U.S. Marine Corps. Alternatively, if a military base is not feasible, the Philippines could conduct combined naval or Coast Guard patrols with its allies. The Philippines and the U.S. could also consider linking China's gray zone actions to other areas of the U.S.-China relationship. This would signal to Beijing that its encroachments on the Philippines come with significant costs. Given the deep economic ties between China and the U.S., these costs could include economic sanctions, suspension of diplomatic negotiations, and termination of bilateral trade agreements with China. It remains to be seen if the Philippines' new strategies to address gray zone threats will be effective. However, these efforts have undoubtedly put the whole world on alert against Chinese transgressions. China is aware that the world is watching, which may deter it from taking extreme measures in Philippine waters. Do you think the Philippines will eventually succeed in deterring China, or will it need to adopt alternative strategies? Tell us in the comments and stay tuned to Out There International for comprehensive insight into the most pressing global issues.